I grew up in Libya and Pakistan, and I thought I had sufficient knowledge of Islam. I'm also Muslim from generations, but I was very surprised to find out my knowledge is not as sufficient in Islam as I thought it was. So let me share a clip that I recently watched of this sheikh, and I learned something new, and I just want to open a discussion dialogue about what my viewers think about it. I also want to ask ChatGPT if this is true because I was not aware of this. So let's watch.
Can two Muslims marry when both parents disagree because of difference in nationality? For the man, he doesn't need the consent of the, technically speaking. I don't want to cause drama between you, but I'm talking technically. Yeah? Is it a valid marriage? Yes. For the man, he doesn't need to get the consent of his family, father or mother. He doesn't need that. For the woman, she has to have the consent of the father because he's the wali. Yeah? He has to agree for your marriage. If that doesn't happen, then it is an invalid nikah. It's an invalid marriage. All the best. Maybe it's for the best. I don't know. Maybe.
So that sounds kind of discriminatory a little bit. I'm just trying to figure out why that would be. Maybe to protect the girl because girls are more emotionally charged, more emotionally driven. Boys are more logical, and girls can be taken advantage of. They can be manipulated. However, boys usually aren't manipulated or taken advantage of. Also, I was just thinking that girls do get trafficked and sold in markets if they get in hands of like a wrong person. That may be one reason, but it still doesn't make a lot of sense. But first let me find out if it is true or not, because for me, growing up as Muslim, I thought for marriage consent of both boy and a girl is necessary for marriage, and parental consent is preferred but it is not required. Let's ask ChatGPT. Hey ChatGPT, can you please explain in Muslim marriage is bride and groom consent sufficient for the marriage contract?
Hey, great question. In a Muslim marriage, the consent of both the bride and groom is absolutely essential for the marriage to be valid. Without their mutual consent, the marriage cannot take place. However, there's an additional point to consider when it comes to the bride's consent. In many interpretations of Islamic law, especially within the Sunni tradition, the involvement of a guardian, wali, usually the bride's father or a male relative, is also required to approve the marriage. The guardian's role is to ensure the marriage is in the best interest of the bride and that her rights are protected. That said, some schools of thought, like the Hanafi school, allow an adult woman to marry without her guardian's consent as long as she is choosing a suitable partner. This gives her more autonomy in making that decision. So while bride and groom consent is central, the requirement for a guardian's approval depends on the specific interpretation of Islamic law being followed. Would you like to dive into more detail on this?
Yes. Does a woman need a guardian consent or a guardian approval, even if it's her second marriage or third marriage?
Great follow-up question. In Islamic law, if a woman is getting married for the second time or more, whether she is widowed or divorced, she does not need a guardian's, wali's, consent or approval for remarriage. This is because a previously married woman is seen as having experience in marital matters and is considered fully capable of making her own decisions regarding her next marriage. For a first-time marriage, most schools of thought, like the Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali, require the presence of a guardian to approve the marriage, alongside the bride's consent to ensure that her best interests are protected. However, for a second or third marriage, the woman has more autonomy and her own consent is sufficient. This distinction is based on the belief that after experiencing a previous marriage, a woman is more knowledgeable and confident in choosing her partner. So, for a second or third marriage, a woman does not require the guardian's approval, only her own consent. Does that clarify things? Let me know if you'd like further details.
I'm definitely surprised, but I did grow up in Hanafi school of thought, so that's understandable. That does allow an adult woman to get married without a guardian consent. But then she said, as long as the groom is suitable. A lot of time in traditional Muslim societies, girls get married around like under 25 or around that age, and a girl's brain is not fully developed until she is 25 years of age. But having said that, a girl can be manipulated by her guardian too into marrying someone that is not appropriate for her, even though a guardian should be there to protect her best interest. Why is it that a girl needs a guardian permission or approval for marriage, however, a boy doesn't? And don't you think the guardian can manipulate the girl also and get her married to a person who is not suitable for her? As we see a lot of times in Europe, when girls are forcefully sent back home, like to countries in Pakistan, and they do get married to boys that are completely not appropriate or suitable for them by their guardians.
This is an important question and highlights some real concerns about the role of guardianship in marriage. The reason for a guardian's permission. In Islamic tradition, the requirement for a woman to have a guardian for marriage was historically intended to protect her and ensure her best interests were being looked after. Here's the reasoning. 1. Protection from exploitation. In the historical context, women often had less financial independence and fewer legal rights than men. The guardian's role was to ensure that the woman was entering into a marriage that would safeguard her rights, protect her financially, and ensure that the man she was marrying was suitable. 2. Emotional considerations. Marriage is not just a legal contract, but also an emotional and lifelong commitment. The guardian's role is seen as one of care, making sure that the woman isn't pressured or manipulated into marrying someone who might not treat her well. 3. Ensuring fairness. The guardian was meant to make sure that the marriage contract was entered into on fair terms, especially in cases where women might not have been familiar with legal or financial aspects of marriage. Why doesn't a boy need permission? For men, they don't require a guardian because traditionally, men were seen as more financially independent, socially empowered, and capable of making decisions regarding marriage. Since men were generally expected to be the providers in a marriage, they were presumed to be in a better position to make their own decisions about who they wanted to marry. Can a girl be manipulated by her guardian? Absolutely. And this is where your concern about guardianship is valid. While the role of the guardian is meant to be protective, there have been cases where it has been misused. 1. Forced marriages. Unfortunately, in some cultures, women are coerced into marrying men they don't want to marry. This goes directly against Islamic teachings. Forced marriage is not permitted in Islam, and the woman's consent is a fundamental requirement for the marriage to be valid. 2. Misuse of authority. Yes, you're right that unfortunately, guardianship can sometimes be misused. While the original intention behind requiring a guardian's consent was to protect the woman, it can, in some cases, lead to situations where the woman is pressured or even forced into a marriage against her will. This is especially concerning in instances where families arrange marriages for reasons like financial gain, social pressure, or cultural expectations, rather than the well-being of the woman. Islamic law, however, is clear on one key point. Forced marriage is forbidden. The Prophet Muhammad PBU explicitly said that a woman's consent is necessary for a valid marriage. If she does not agree, the marriage cannot be considered valid in Islamic law. Forced marriages and coercion. Unfortunately, in some places, we do see examples of girls being sent abroad or pressured into marriages they don't want, which is cultural coercion rather than a practice rooted in true Islamic teachings. Islamically, a guardian's role is to protect and guide, not to control. When this role is abused, it goes against the essence of the religion. If a guardian acts unjustly or tries to force a marriage that the woman does not want, Islamic scholars and legal authorities can step in to invalidate such actions. A woman has the right to challenge her guardian's decision, and if she feels she's being forced, she can bring her case before an Islamic judge, Qadi, who can override the guardian's authority if it's being misused. Modern considerations. In modern contexts, where women are often educated, financially independent, and socially empowered, the traditional reasoning behind guardianship may feel outdated. This is why some scholars, particularly within the Hanafi school, argue that an adult woman should have the right to marry without her guardian's permission, as long as the marriage is to a suitable partner. This view allows for more autonomy while still upholding the values of fairness and protection. Balancing tradition and modern reality. Many Muslim communities are actively engaging with these questions, trying to balance the original protective purpose of guardianship with the realities of modern life, where women often have more resources to make informed decisions about their marriages. The consensus in Islamic law remains that the woman's consent is essential, and any form of coercion or force is un-Islamic. Conclusion. While the guardian's role was originally about ensuring fairness and protection, it's crucial that this role is never used to force or manipulate a woman into marriage. Islam places a high value on the woman's consent and free will, and in cases where guardians act unjustly, Islamic law provides ways to protect the woman's rights.
So I just want to share how that Sheikh answered that question and how ChatGPT answered the question so thoroughly that you completely understand why a consent is needed from guardian and what are the responsibilities of a guardian in that case, and how women consent and free will is so important. So that's where I have a problem with a lot of sheikhs and Muslim scholars, that they don't explain it. They just completely don't share the essence of the religion, and that's why there are so many misconceptions about Islam. Please let me know, what do you think?